Hi. Now we will discuss about the cancer biomedical engineering strategies of the cancer. But to know first the causes of the cancer and what kills the most from the cancer is a metastasis. So we will discuss a little more about cancer metastasis. So first, two genes of classes that's responsible of triggering the cancer. So, uh, like the mutations of the DNA, especially when it's important for cell proliferation or cell cycle, that's very important for causing cancer. So especially there are two types. First, if there are genes which is promote the cell growth. So which usually happens mutations in the proto-oncogene, and then mutation causes this proto-oncogene into an oncogene. So what is proto-oncogene? That's a normal gene. In fact, it's normal, but that could become an oncogene due to mutations or increased expression level. So that we call as a oncogene. And oncogene, and if I have an analogy, it's like in the car, it's like an accelerator. So let's say we have these two layers and of the gene and normal gene, then the car, like as it's, let's say cell proliferation, it goes in normal. But even one mutation of this proto-oncogene that turn this one into an oncogene means it like kind of a pushing the accelerator. And these usually are as a dominant factor that proto-oncogene become an oncogene, then even this one mutation can lead to accelerated cell division. On the other hand, there are genes that suppresses cell division. So it's always keep checking, preventing tumor formation. And that gene we call a tumor suppressor gene. So if we consider this as a car, it's like a brake system. So in the normal gene, they regulate the cell growth with these two layers. So because there's a tumor suppressor gene. Let's assume there's a first mutation happens to one allele of this tumor suppressor gene. You see this? There's another brake system still working on. So with one hit or first mutation, the car is still okay that because it has still brake. But what if this remaining part of the gene, tumor suppressor gene, also undergo another second mutation that we call two hit? Then there's no brake, so it'll keep going and cell proliferation forming tumor or leading to cancer. Or for some reason, a loss of this layer makes there remains no brake system, which can cause a tumor formation. So these are two gene classes that triggers cancer formation. And now let's turn it to, but what makes that mutation more prevalent? And that is important aspect of the causation of cancer. So that process of cancer forming we call as a carcinogenesis, the initiation of cancer formation. And there are different kinds which can lead to this, such as chemical carcinogen. So certain chemicals are likely to cause further mutation in the DNA. And another is radiation. Especially ionizing radiation can easily cause DNA mutation, and that may lead to carcinogenic process. Or even some virus is known to cause cancer. So in the history, earlier times, we consider virus may be the dominant factor, which turned out not to be true, but still some viral infection and persistent infection can cause a cancer. So in the end, in these certain genes, especially oncogene and tumor suppressor genes, the mutations in these genes are the primary cause of cancer. So mutations is very important. And now let's look at some of this data that what causes cancer. You can see a lot from diet, tobacco, smoking, and sunlight, and viruses, and occupational, and alcohol drinking. So what's very interesting here is these mutation causing factor is a lot from environment, such as diet and obesity and smoking and infections and ionizing radiation. And even our lifestyle of stress and lack of physical activity, and sometimes environmental pollutants such as asbestos inhalation. You see this is an example of asbestos used for the ceiling of a house or building, but that turned out to be not good for your lung because it can cause a lung cancer. So let's look at in this aspect. In fact, we can make this as an environmental factor as even over 90%. So in terms of cancer, we can consider in the end the cell genetic mutation which causes an proto-oncogene into oncogene, or the mutations in tumor suppressor genes can cause cancer, but that changes are responsible from majority by inappropriate lifestyle or environment, which is very important for us how to prevent our cancer. So on the other hand, then the rest of genetic factor is only accounts for 5 to 10%. So for example, there is a BRCA mutation. So BRCA mutation 1 and 2 are known to be responsible for high occurrence of breast cancer or ovarian cancer. However, the carrier of these mutations are actually pretty rare. So less than, let's say, 0.3% of populations are carriers of genetic mutation, which has a large effect, of course, in increases the cancer risk. However, this heredity cause is not that much, like less than 10% of all cancer. So we have some control. So here's a part of the conclusion from the New England Journal of Medicine about the causation of cancer from the twin study in European countries. So this is part of the conclusion. I'll read it, go with you. Inherited genetic factors make a minor contribution to susceptibility to most type of neoplasm. So their finding indicates that the environment or our lifestyle has the principal role in causing sporadic cancer. So now let's discuss about the process of metastasis. As I told you before, the primary tumor in the original site, let's say we have a breast cancer, the primary tumor in the breast is usually not the cause of death for the patient. So that primary tumor, by definition, is the area of cancer cells at the originating site. So it becomes forming tumor, and once it becomes several millimeters, it's clinically detectable by if it's outside or even inside by taking picture imaging of such as an MRI. So that's, look at this cartoon. Let's say if some cells turned their proliferation program into tumorous form that we call as a primary tumor. And once they grow over the size of the diffusion limit, they start to recruit a nearby vessel to form a new vessel that we call as an angiogenesis. And by the time with this happens, and that tumor cells and usually arising from epithelial tissue, which are firmly based on the basement membrane, and when it's usually programmed that it detaches from its original, it's supposed to die, but that's not the case for cancer. So they detach and they invade to the neighboring tissue, especially like when it become a problem when they reach out to the nearby blood vessels or lymphatic vessels, so that when it comes out of the vessel, from the blood clotting, the traveling clot we call as an embolus. So we can kind of call it as a tumor embolism and enter into the circulation. And what happens when the tumor cells inside the blood, then the heart will pump it out. The first thing to go into is its lungs. So it can lodge arrest in organs in lung. And in lung, the cells may adhere to the vessel wall and ooze out, crawl out of the vessel into the tissue. And that process we call as a extravasation. On the other hand, the other part of this, from the tissue to getting into the vessel, we call intravasation. So then the cells will have to survive in this new microenvironment and proliferate, and of course it requires angiogenesis to form a big tumor. And that new colony of the tumor formation in distant organ we call as a metastasis. And metastatic tumors undergo this almost like triathlon-like difficult hurdles, because it has to adapt itself to different microenvironment inside the blood, and it has to crawl out. So it is likely to be more resistant and more aggressive types of the cells. So because of that, metastatic tumors are much harder to treat to the conventional therapies, such as even chemotherapy. It's more difficult to treat. That become a problem. So that's why metastasis is responsible for the majority of solid tumor death. So, or we call it as a secondary tumor, when the cancer cells acquire the ability to penetrate and infiltrate surrounding normal tissue and spread and growth in the distant area. So with this, we'll discuss about now next time cancer screening and diagnosis. Thank you for your attention.